to say thank you for being here. On behalf of the Lynn City Council and the Lynn ISD Health Department, I want to welcome all of you to the City of Lynn Opioid Forum. It's an important forum for us to discuss opioids within our city, how they affect a lot of folks that are gathered here, and a lot of folks throughout the whole community. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge some of those that have helped organize this important event. I'll ask that you hold any applause until after I announce everyone. I want to acknowledge my colleagues on the City Council, Council President Sear, Vice President Barton, Councilor Lozzi, Councilor Starbird, Councilor Colucci, Councilor Capano, Councilor Lapierre, Councilor Nett, Terry Young, our Secretary, our Office Administrator, and Lisa Herrera for their help. And I want to acknowledge my colleagues on the Opioid Subcommittee, Councilor Walsh and Councilor Shakutis. Many of them are here in attendance tonight. I also want to acknowledge Michele Desmarais, who's the Public Health Director here in the City of Lynn, and staff members Mary Chalmers, Fountain, and Jackie Smart for all the work that they've put in to help this forum progress throughout the past couple of weeks where it kind of got a little intense. But I think we're where we need to be. Also, a special thank you to Allison Perry from Community Development for her help. Allison's been amazing getting the literature printed and organized for us so that everything would run as smooth as could be. I also want to acknowledge Lynn Community Television, the Daily Item, the Lynn Journal for covering today's forum, to many organizations that are participating in the corridor, for answering questions and providing literature for those in attendance. Thank you. I also want to acknowledge my colleagues from the school committee. I see committee member Satterwhite here. Jared Nicholson. Yes, Jared. Thank you. The mayor's out of town, but I want to acknowledge the mayor too. He's been very supportive of this conference. I want to acknowledge the Lynn Police Department, the Lynn Fire Department, and local EMS for everything that they do each day. They are often the front line in this epidemic and often put their own lives at risk while helping others. I want to remind everyone that this forum is being broadcast live, possibly, I believe, by the Lynn Community Television, and will be rebroadcast on Lynn Community Television and on YouTube. That being said, I ask for your cooperation. Please be respectful of your panelists during the oral and PowerPoint and video presentations and our audience here and at home. Please reserve any questions that you may have to the question and answer portion of our program at 7 p.m. Please refrain from any loud conversations, and the use of cell phones is not permitted within the council chamber. I remind those of you who do have cell phones to make sure they're on silent mode now, please. And again, on behalf of the City Council, Lynn Public Health Department, I want to welcome everyone. My name is Brian Field, and I am the chairperson of the Opioid Subcommittee for the Lynn City Council. Last November, following the city election, Council President Sear invited me to his office to share some ideas and goals I had campaigned for and what expectations he had for me. We had a lengthy discussion on opioids and how it has impacted Lynn and so many families in our city and what role the City Council could play. With his support, the support of my colleagues in the Council, our panelists, and those from City Hall that I previously acknowledged, tonight's forum, open and free to the public, was made possible. Personal comments I have received from so many in the community helped guide me in planning today's forum. Many of you are here because the opioid epidemic has affected you or someone in your immediate family or extended family. Maybe you're here because the opioid epidemic has affected a friend, a neighbor, a co-worker, or someone in their family. Maybe you're here because you want to learn more about opioids. The 6 panelists that are here tonight were chosen by me. They are here voluntarily. They were chosen because of their knowledge, their involvement, their experience, and their ability to educate others. They helped me understand more, and I know they will help many of you. Some have asked why there was no one in recovery on the panel. Some of you might be wondering that as well. My answer is, having to choose someone to share their story, their testament of recovery over others, would have been difficult. I know there will be other forums planned, opportunities for those in recovery to participate as panelists. That is my pledge to you and your friends and family. I now want to take a moment to introduce our panelists. I will begin by introducing all 6 panelists and the organization they represent. I will then read each panelist's biography before their presentation. Again, as moderator, I respectfully ask for your cooperation while in the council chamber by listening, learning, and sharing what you learned tonight with others in the community. Thank you. Our guest speakers include Patrick Byrne, a community liaison, street advocate, and parent. District Attorney of Essex County, Jonathan Blodgett. Sheriff of Essex County, Kevin Coppinger. Chief Executive Officer of Lynn Community Health, Dr. Kiame Mahnaiah. Director of Behavioral Health and Prevention Program at Bridgewell, Wendy Kent. And Chief of Police here in the City of Lynn, Michael Mageary. Our first panelist to speak is Patrick Byrne. Patrick's biography reads, Community Liaison Patrick Byrne has worked as a street advocate in downtown Lynn for over 12 years. As the street advocate, Patrick works with addicts and their families, as well as with the Lynn community on issues of homelessness, mental health, and substance abuse. He provides outreach to homeless encampments and to individuals living on the streets in the Central Business District by assisting them in finding employment, obtaining detoxification placements, and assisting local merchants with intervention services. Patrick Byrne is a graduate of St. John's Preparatory School and Antioch University. He has served on the Chamber of Government Affairs Committee and the city's Mental Health Criminal Justice Committee. He has lived in Lynn for 41 years with his wife for 47 years. He has 2 children and 3 grandchildren. Patrick lost his son to addiction and works every day helping others affected by this epidemic to obtain the help they need by encouraging the use of supportive services. Patrick.
Good evening, everybody. It's just before you take the microphone, you find out it's live streamed, right? Well, there goes half my damn material. Brian thanked everybody, and I'll just do the same very, very briefly. I've had the opportunity to work with the other members on the panel in some capacity within the community, all with a common purpose. What they have done, they give unselfishly of themselves, and their care is real. If it wasn't, they wouldn't be here, and I certainly wouldn't be with them. I'd like to thank everybody who showed up. I didn't have any idea what type of turnout this would be, and this is very gratifying. You know, anybody, I've sat on so many committees and panels where people get together and they start talking about problems, and everybody becomes an expert at identifying problems. What we have, though, is a scarcity of solutions. And again, the folks on this panel are committed to try to provide solutions and work hard with you to do that. Who suffers from addiction? It's the addicted person themselves, the family around them, their employer, their community. The ones most affected, however, are the children of the addict. Drug addiction is one of the hardest things for anybody to deal with, particularly the addict. It consumes the life of the addict and everybody around them. Their life begins to disintegrate. Nothing can compare to the chaos and turmoil of addiction. Feeding the beast is a full-time job. Constant desperation to avoid withdrawal never lets up. When an addict awakes, they awake to the unmistakable feelings of withdrawal. That's their first vision of the day. So what do they concentrate on? Getting more drugs. They begin to give in, and then they begin to give up. Their manipulation and lies mount. As all of you know, addicts are incapable of telling the truth to anybody, including themselves. Their brief moments of happiness begins to fade. Their spirit dims. My own son, as a parent, and you think your kid's using, you ask them questions that you don't want to hear the answer to. Are you high? Praying that they'll say no, whether they are or not. So you're lying to yourself. They become hopeless, and then they go into total denial. Why else would somebody play Russian roulette a few times a day, knowing that there's not one bullet in the gun, but there are 3 or 4? The suicide rate of addicts is very, very difficult to identify because an overdose is an overdose, right? Without a suicide note. But in and of itself, it's a cry. It's a cry for help. It's a cry of unhappiness. It's 100% commonality is untreated mental health issues. And that has to change. And maybe one of the worst results in a family is when the adult addict prostitutes their own children in an effort to continue to use. In the family, particularly with children, they fall into different roles. One is the family hero, usually the eldest child, steps into the breach, tries to take care of the others, and in doing so compromises their own identity and their ability to grow normally and healthily. Then you have the scapegoat, and that's the kid in the family that everybody feels comfortable to dump on, not because they're doing anything wrong, but because the other members are so intrinsically unhappy and need to find a vehicle to reach out to. There's the lost child, the one that withdraws into themselves, the kid whose growth emotionally, mentally, with relationships is stifled and never can reach the fruition of a healthy upbringing. It all relates to the stigma, and as a parent of an addict, particularly one who lost their life to addiction, one of the things that you always wonder about is, what could I have done different as a parent? What did I do wrong? That and the feeling of shame that other people look upon you as maybe you weren't the person they thought you were because of the result. And that's so unfair to the parents because, quite frankly, there's not much you can do. I mean, the fight from addiction is so heavy that a parent's words have already been shut out. There's no communication. I tried everything. I mean, I tried the total love and enveloping into the household. I took the other route as well over the years. This is a 20-year battle in our family. The other route where you shun your child and say you can't come around here anymore. The day that my son passed away, I happened to have a chance encounter with him on the street that very morning. And as he walked by the house, I asked him what was up, and he said he was going down to get breakfast and that he would see me. This was a Saturday. He said, "I'll see you tomorrow, Dad. I'll be over for supper. I love you." Well, this was 4 years ago, and as I've reviewed those events, I've often looked back and how grateful that I am that my final words to my son was, "I love you." I couldn't imagine if that final conversation ended with, "Do you know what you're putting your mother and I through? Don't ever darken this doorway again." I don't think I could have lived with myself. Furthermore, the costs of addiction go into society, just pragmatically, economically, the healthcare costs. We've thrown a lot of Band-Aids at the issue, but yet we haven't stopped the bleeding. And we bleed financially as well as emotionally. Business development. I just read recently that the Linway project's going to get another revisit, and they're waiting for that first shovel in the ground to have some economic momentum happen with the development. Well, the Linway's already been developed. You go to the sites where the multi-million-dollar construction projects are going to take place, and you'll see rows of tents. Those are homeless encampments, generally occupied by folks with mental health issues, folks with legal issues, and folks with dependency issues that can't survive in a structured situation such as a shelter. Stores and restaurants are impacted. If you have a store or a restaurant and you have folks hanging out in front of there who are up to no good, committing crimes of property, your businesses are impacted. The crime, the snatch and grab, as I said my opening remark, that the addiction, they have to feed the beast. They have to get high. They have to get well. And if that means they break your car window to pick a cell phone off your front seat, well, that's a natural outcome of their problem. The reputation the city gets and what it does to property values, those are all real concerns. But my basic point is addiction hurts everybody, everybody. And we owe it to our community to work harder to stop this terrible epidemic. So I will ask any parent in the room to please, when you get home, reach out to your children, tell them you love them. It's an important thing, and you never know when you won't have that opportunity again. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick, for leading us off with those powerful words and in your personal story. Our next presenter will be our District Attorney, Jonathan Blodgett. Essex District Attorney Jonathan W. Blodgett was re-elected to his fourth term in November 2014. Since he was first elected in 2002, District Attorney Blodgett has been a leader in confronting a range of issues, including the heroin and OxyContin epidemic, domestic violence, underage drinking, auto insurance fraud, and gun violence, both through prosecution, diversion, in partnership with schools, police, and community leaders. District Attorney Blodgett has an innovative and effective approach to fighting crime. He instituted an adult drug diversion program and has rolled it out to all district courts in the county. He also expanded juvenile and youthful diversion programs throughout the county. He initiated a special gun court session in Lynn District Court that has eliminated the backlog in gun cases in Lynn. He partnered with the Insurance Fraud Bureau of Massachusetts and local police to prosecute auto insurance fraud, which has not only saved ratepayers millions of dollars, but has made the streets safer. His office has also expanded the use of high-risk assessment teams to better protect victims of domestic violence and hold batterers accountable. He was recently elected president-elect of the National District Attorneys Association. He is the only prosecutor in the country to serve on the executive committee of the National Association of Drug Court Professionals. He has served on the board of Massachusetts Office of Victims Assistance since 2005. He also serves as the DA's liaison to the State Adult Drug Court Advisory Committee. He is a graduate of Peabody High School, Princeton University, and Suffolk Law School. He lives in Peabody with his wife Judy, and they have 3 children and 3 grandchildren. It's my honor to now announce Jonathan Blodgett, our district attorney.
This young man used to come to my house all the time for sleepovers. He was in Cub Scouts with my son. I knew him. I saw him grow up, and he was on the athletic teams. He was found the next day, slumped over, and his computer dead. And I subsequently found out that it was the first time he had tried it, and just devastating. And I'm looking at him in his casket saying, how could this happen? It was overwhelming. So I made a decision that I was going to go forward and do what I could do. So we put together a program modeled after our very successful and robust juvenile diversion program and youthful diversion program. And our qualifications for those programs are pretty much the same that we replicated for the drug diversion, which is if what brought you to us doesn't involve an act of violence and you have little or no record or de minimis record, we'll give you a chance to go through diversion.
The drug diversion program is really critical in terms of assisting and helping addicts in real time, because as we've found out with heroin and opiate addiction, every hour, every day, every minute, quite frankly, is critical. We need to get these people help right away. So when somebody is charged with a possessory type offense, possession of heroin, for example, or some other drug-related minor offense, if we can get them treatment on a demand, the assessment occurs indeed at the courthouse, and get them into treatment immediately, into detox, we're saving lives.
So the whole idea is to give someone a chance, give someone a second chance.
So my job on a daily basis is to screen the court. So I read every single complaint that comes into the court system, whether it's a juvenile, whether it's a young adult, whether it's somebody who's being charged with a drug offense. And I have to make a determination at that point whether we're going to offer them services. So services will consist of counseling for the juveniles and whatever services are deemed appropriate for them. Same as youthful. As for the drug cases, we do drug treatment on demand, and that's what I offer.
I'm sick and I feel like crap and I don't want to be here, and it's bad enough that I feel like crap that I just got arrested for possession class A. Now I have to spend the day in Lawrence Superior Court. I don't want to be here. So I'm moody and I'm not a nice person. So we're sitting in the office and waiting for Mara Cruz to get there, and she walks in and, you know, very, very inviting, and made me feel like I mattered a little bit. And I hadn't felt that in a while. I don't know if that's my own brain telling me that, but she kind of made that subside. And she had described the diversion program and what it entailed and what they were going to do and how they wanted to help. And the fact that she knew what needed to be done and who she needed to call on, that was more than I've ever been offered in my life. Again, my family never had dealt with this before, so we were kind of blind going into it. We didn't know what to do, where to send me.
Yeah, so I went into court and they said they wanted to have somebody talk with me about a diversion program. So they told me that basically they were going to give me a chance to try to sit down and meet with people and make a plan to try to help myself. And if they did, that they wouldn't go ahead and press charges at the end, because I had like a good Corey check before, so if, you know, I was scared I was going to have no chance of getting a job with my degree. So they told me that they could work with me, and then that's when I got introduced to everybody.
We're lawyers, and our job, again, as lawyers, is to uphold the law and make sure our citizens are safe. The clinicians would set up the program, and the idea being is that you complete the program, you do what the clinicians want. When they notify us that you've successfully completed that program, then it gets back to our bailiwick, we handle it, and more often than not, the cases are dismissed, or we fashion a remedy that's just. But we're trying to give someone the ability to modify their behavior, make better decisions, and not have a criminal record.
But I've been very, very pleased at the kind of the foresight of the DA's office in terms of a long-term commitment. We're now talking about a 10-year commitment to this program. The expansion of the program now to every court in Essex County. The expansion of the age ranges of the program. I think we started at ages 17 to roughly 26, and we've been treating people in their teens, we've been treating people into their 40s. But people who really kind of fit the model of they need help. You know, they've done something illegal and gotten involved in a system, but the core of it is that they need help. And them getting help is a win-win for society at large and for them and their family.
Yeah, so I met with my case manager. We made a treatment plan. We looked at everything, and you know, we decided we needed like to meet with a mental health counselor, to go to meetings, and you know, and I would always be having different little tasks like work on my resume, or I don't know, call a dentist, or just try little week-to-week things. And they set me up with a recovery coach. She would come pick me up, bring me to my drug tests. The other important thing too is that I was working 2 jobs and I didn't have a car, and I live out in a suburban town, so transportation was an issue. And they were able to try to work into my treatment plan of like, well, if we need to meet with the recovery coach and you need to take a drug test, why don't we have the recovery coach come pick you up? You go to the meeting before or after you take the drug test, for instance. So they were able to try to look at me as an individual, which I feel like 10 years ago it wouldn't have happened. They would have just said, do this program or don't do the program. And they actually tried to work to help fit it to me. And they had, you know, connections with my mental health counselors and all the other people in my life. And that was really awesome. Like, it definitely helped me, because to get me through the period of time, the first couple of months, I wasn't feeling that good. And knowing that the accountability, or knowing that I'm getting picked up to go to a drug test, or having the random drug testing, was able to help get me to the point where I could see clear, a little more clear.
As soon as the clinician came in, again, I'm such a thankful person for every single one of these people. They all came in right when I needed them, and in a huge way. Putting it lightly, they saved my life. They moved mountains for me, and they still continue to do. I'm in aftercare right now, and my case manager still sees me on a weekly basis, every other week, just for that sense of, because I know what I need to do to stay in this sober state, and she knows that I know what I need to do, so she's there for me, just like she was that first day. And I'm eternally indebted to all of these people that were a part of my success, because without them, my success wouldn't be my success.
So you need that support, and don't think you can do it alone, and it's not going to be overnight. This is going to be the rest of their lives. And if you don't have the support of other people, and you don't want to do it yourself, I thank God for programs like this. Again, I didn't know they existed, but what would I have done? Oh, here, take my son and just put him in jail. Put him in jail because he used some drugs. How would that help? That doesn't help at all. You have to work on the person.
Identifying cases for juvenile, youthful, and drug diversion is really much different than the traditional role of the prosecutor. That is, that we seek justice, of course, on those, for members of our community, for victims. But here we're trying to help those that are charged with crimes. But we've found through the existence of these programs and the studies about the programs that if we help those that are addicted, we're going to really improve public safety.
It speaks to like the whole philosophical change in how to deal with addiction, not to stigmatize it, not, to understand that people do have an issue, and that there are a lot of people that are good people that, maybe just happen to have a drug problem. And I feel like I know a lot of people who their criminal past stops them from having any chance of having a job where they can support themselves in the future. So that's sort of like the one thing that I feel like this program is going to help a lot, to try to give those people the chance who want it and who will take it, to give them the opportunity.
If you go on my office website at mass.gov, there's a series of 4 presentations like this that talk about what we're trying to do with respect to this horrible epidemic. And as Mr. as Mr. Byrne had said earlier, we've been dealing with this for a number of years and sort of a Band-Aid approach, but I do think that some of the strategies have started to come together. Some of the techniques and the interdisciplinary approaches have started to pay some dividends and be successful. The video that was just presented is a video that we had done in the 10th anniversary of our drug diversion program. As some of you may know, we have partnered up with Bridgewell to do this program, and that the gentleman you saw on the video for a period of time, Mr. Kennard, has retired, and Wendy is ably taking his spot at Bridgewell, and has worked very well with my office to provide services to those individuals we've given an opportunity to avail themselves of the drug diversion program. Treatment on demand in lieu of prosecution. That is a a mindset that 20 years ago wasn't available, I think, for those in the criminal justice system. We're making sure that anybody who's suffering from the disease of addiction, who has a substance use disorder, is going to get the opportunity to get treatment on demand, to get help if that person is willing to go through the process. One of the, I think, beauties of the program is once we make an assertion that somebody will benefit from diversion, again, in lieu of prosecution, we step back. And that's when the professionals at Bridgewell step in and determine the type of treatment the individual will get. Everybody's treatment plan is different. I suspect perhaps that Wendy will talk about that at some point, but everybody gets a different individualized treatment plan. The, I think, beauty of the program is that it's evolving with time. The evolution of the program, I think, speaks to its success. When we first started this, we had it in 2 of the 8 district courts in Essex County. We have them in all the district courts presently. It was for people in the age group of 18 to 25. We took a doctor from the city of Lynn who was 70 years old recently into the program. So there's no age restriction. There is no limit in terms of the geography. If you live in the county, you will have the availability of diversion if it's appropriate. The young woman on the video, her name is Tanya. She actually was willing to speak publicly when we had our celebration last year with Bridgewell for the 10-year anniversary of the program. And she said, when she spoke to the people who were assembled there, "Thank God I got arrested in Essex County." She's a New Hampshire resident because they didn't have this type of program in New Hampshire. She's a successful graduate of the diversion program. 2 points I'd like to make about that. Number one, the average treatment is 6 months. That's frankly what anybody who's in this business will tell you need at a minimum 6 months treatment. We've had people in the program for more than 6 months. We've had somebody there for over a year. And insurance, if you have insurance, fine. If you don't, it's not a disclaimer. You're not going to be asked to leave the program. If you fail, and anybody again in this business knows that people who are getting treatment for the disease of addiction will fall and will fail, if the clinicians at Bridgewell determine that you are willing to try it again, they will reboot your program. Again, we step back, as I said in the video, we're the lawyers, we're not clinicians. We put it in the hands of Bridgewell. When you successfully complete the program, the case that brought you in front of the court is dismissed. You don't have a criminal record. And getting back to my theme about how the program is only good if it keeps evolving, when we started this was when someone was arraigned, they were approached and given the option. Now we're doing it pre-arraignment before somebody even steps into court if it's appropriate. So I'm pleased to tell you, we can always be better, but I'm pleased to tell you that we've had over 900 people in Essex County go through the program since its inception. I know we'll break 1,000 this summer. It's a program that I'm totally committed to, as is the people in my office. And as a result of this program, we had sort of a epiphany in that your soon-to-retire superintendent of schools, Kathy Latham, was speaking at a forum I was at for the Chamber of Commerce a couple of years ago. She talked about the children of families who are suffering from substance abuse disorder. What happened from that was what was born from that discussion, because I was totally, when I heard the numbers, I was really stunned. But what was born from that was a meeting with then Chief Coppinger, Dr. Latham, his staff, and myself, and we set up the All-Star program in Bree Junior High to help children who are dealing with that in the home life that they have. And I'm telling you, to me, the heroes in the city of Lynn in this program, it's a fantastic program, but the heroes, Julie Luth, the principal of Breed, as well as Lauren Phelps. I see Lauren here today. Is Julie here with you, Lauren? No. And Lauren, and they do amazing work with the kids. A Band-Aid? Yes. A good start? I think so. We can do more. We can continue to evolve, but I think we all owe it to the people that we serve to treat those individuals and those families who need the help they need to do the best we can to do it. That's going to be how we're going to be judged when it's all said and done. What did we do for people? What did we do for families who needed assistance with respect to dealing with this terrible disease? And we'll continue to do that. So I thank you for your attention and your time, and we'll continue. We'll continue not just to do a Band-Aid approach, but to fight to have good strategies and good techniques going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, District Attorney Blodgett, for your presentation and for recognizing certainly the All-Star program that takes place at Breed and the soldiers that fight every day to help those children and their families. Thank you. Our next panelist is our Sheriff, Kevin Coppinger. Sheriff Coppinger is a graduate of Northeastern University with a Bachelor of Science degree in Criminal Justice and graduate from Mahnaiah College with a Master of Arts degree in Criminal Justice. He is also a graduate of the 203rd session of the Federal Bureau of Investigation's National Academy in Quantico, Virginia. Sheriff Coppinger started his law enforcement career as a Lynnfield police officer before transitioning to the Lynn Police Department in 1985, where he moved up through the ranks to become police chief in 2009, serving as chief until taking over the office of sheriff. As chief of the Lynn Police Department, Coppinger distinguished himself as an innovative leader in public safety on the local, county, and statewide level, recognized his involvement in efforts to improve community policing and regional work to combat drug crimes. He was invited by President Obama's administration to be part of the White House 21st Century Policing Initiative. Kevin F. Coppinger was elected in November 2016 and was sworn in as the 31st Sheriff of Essex County in January of 2017. As Sheriff, he is committed to bringing positive change to the Sheriff's Department by improving staff skills, training, and accountability, expanding mental health and detox treatment to confront the opioid epidemic, improving the reentry programs and community follow-up, and by strengthening collaborative with municipal, public safety leaders, and community groups and organizations. It's my honor to now present Kevin Coppinger.
Hope you can hear me. I'm not going to touch it again. First of all, I would like to thank Councilor Field and Michele Desmarais and the Lynn City Council for hosting this, and also thank all of you for coming out. Like Brian said originally, I'm very, very touched by the outpouring of folks who came here to learn about this. This epidemic is not going anywhere. I think we all know that. It's crossing all phases of society. It does not discriminate against anybody. I can tell you through my 35 years in law enforcement, it will touch on the whites, the blacks, the browns, the yellows, the straights, the gays, the bisexuals, the Christians, the Jewish folks, the Protestants, you name it, it touches it. No one's going to be away from it. We have to work together as a society. And in my humble opinion, it's in 3 different phases. First and foremost is prevention. I think that's key, and I'm sure Chief Mageary, when he comes up, he'll speak more about that, what the City of Lynn does, because I know they do some great stuff. DA Blodgett talked about Superintendent Latham with the All-Star program, and I can't agree with the DA more. That is tremendous. The second phase would be interdiction, that's the law enforcement phase. Go out and make arrests, arrest the drug dealers, prosecute them, and send them up to me in Middleton. We'll give them a place and put a roof over their heads and 3 squares a day so they don't come back into your community and deal again. And the third phase of that is treatment and rehabilitation, which is really key. And now, my new role as sheriff, I look at it like I'm more at the end of the food chain now. You start with the police, they make the arrest, they go to the district attorney through the judicial system, they get prosecuted in the courts, and if they're convicted, they end up in the correctional institutions, obviously, which now I am a part of. So, one of the things that drove me to run for sheriff is there got to be a better way to do this. We got to think outside the box, and that's what we're trying to do. With the explosion of the opiate epidemic and, in general, substance abuse, our correctional institutions now are our treatment facilities. I applaud the DA for the diversion programs they have. I applaud the City of Lynn, the Police Department, for the prevention programs they have. But some people are going to end up in jail, and a lot of people end up in jail. Here in Essex County, we run on an average of about 1,500 inmates on a daily basis, and a real ballpark number is 75% of them have some type of substance abuse. And also, the majority of our inmates have mental health problems or a combination of both. So it's a very difficult population to attend to. But our goal is to when they come to us, the average stays about 9 months. So when we release them, we want to release them in better shape than when they arrived, hopefully to come back into the communities, be productive members of society, and get their lives back together, and hopefully reunite with families. So I'm going to show you a couple of programs that we run. Oh yeah, Mary, point it up. Where's Mary? Pointing at the computer, not the screen.
At the computer.
Thank God we got Mary. Oh, come on, will you? As my kids would say, duh. All right, here we go. Get the advertisement out of the way. Now, a lot of you remember Bugs Bunny and all the cartoons when we were kids. And the idea of corrections years ago was, hard labor. Lock them up, throw away the key, and just move on. And when their sentence was up, we'd unlock the door, send them back to society. No programming, no treatment. And you know what happens? They go back to the community. They do exactly what they did before. They commit crime, buy their drugs, put the needle back in the arm, or snort up whatever's going to go up the nostrils. And it's just that cycle. That's what we need to change. So, up in Essex County in our Middleton House of Correction, we run a detox program. Actually, we run two. One for men and one for women. They're both 28-day programs. They're 42 beds. We work very closely with the courts in the county, particularly the Lynn Drug Court and the Lawrence Drug Court, and there soon will be one up in Haverhill when they finish the renovations to that courthouse there. But that's a picture, obviously, of the detox unit. They're not in individual cells. They live in dormitory-style housing. You can see the beds. Their personal possessions are beneath that. They do have some privacy, but not a lot. But that's the point of this whole program. Well, I'll get into it. I don't want to get too ahead of myself here with my other screens. But the reasons why we have it, obviously we know there's an opiate epidemic. That's why we're here tonight. And that's why we got to find different ways to combat it. Majority of our population, as I said before, suffers from substance abuse issues, and jails are overcrowded. If you've been following newspapers for the last year or so, there was a criminal justice bill at our State House that we had a lot of review and discussion on, and they just came out with a pretty decent version of it a couple of weeks ago. That affects a lot of what we do. There's a lot of push now to reduce the prison population and get people back into their environment. This detox helps. A couple of statistics for you. As I said, 28-day program, 42 beds, both men and women. The male unit was opened up in December of 2015 and has an 87% success rate. That means they stayed there for the 28 days. They did not get in trouble. They did not use. They followed the rules, and they actively engaged in the programming and the treatment that we provide. Females was opened up July of 2016, almost 2 years ago, 80% success rate. And you can see the numbers on the side, how many people we've processed. You might say, why the females? Why do they have a lower success rate? Females have different issues. A lot of them are moms. A lot of them are trying to deal with emotional issues. Their families are home. They're in custody. They have kids. They're wondering where their kids are. A lot of that affects what they're doing while they're in treatment. So we try to deal with that as best we can. The goal is to have them succeed. Examples of eligible candidates. If I could just kind of paint a picture for you, first of all, Middleton has roughly, I said 1,500 countywide, but the Middleton House of Correction probably averages 1,150 to 1,200 inmates on a daily basis. We have 9 different buildings, most of the housing units, some are programming buildings, but our detox unit is a standalone facility. It's within the wire or within the fence. On the top floor are the ladies, on the bottom floor are the gentlemen. No, they do not intermingle. We're very careful about that. We don't want problems, but they are guarded by correctional officers. We put them in what we call a soft uniform. It's like the golf shirt with the emblems embroidered on there and a pair of khaki pants, not the traditional correctional officer's uniform. We're trying to create an atmosphere of treatment and programming and changing the mind and changing the decision-making skills of these folks that we have there. As I said before, we work very closely with the courts. To quote Judge Jim Lamoth here from the Lynn Drug Court, it gives the clients, we call them, a taste of corrections. Think about that, a taste of corrections. Yes, they are under arrest. Yes, they are incarcerated. They're not mingling with general population. They're not honing their criminal skills by mingling with the general population, but they're in here for 28 days. It's voluntary. So when they come, there's meetings in the courts with obviously the judge. Obviously, assistant district attorneys, defense attorneys, probation, police officers, they have to put together this program or this plan, and then it's referred to the sheriff's office to see if we'll take them. Technically, the decision rests with the office of the sheriff, but I don't think we've ever refused anybody as long as they met our standards. Now, you all know I used to be the chief of police in Lynn, so please don't think I've gone soft on crime. We have folks in our jails who should never get out of jail. They're the ones that murderers, rapists, armed robbers, sex offenders, their folks should be there, but we have a lot of folks in there who are committed low-level crimes, who are low-risk individuals, who fit the bill for this detox program. These are folks who might have been locked up for shoplifting or simple possession of drugs or disorderly conduct, things like that build up over time. It's voluntary when they get there. They actually write off their families for the 28 days, no contact. We want that done so they're focusing on the treatment and the rehab so they can be successful. Oh yeah, we don't allow anybody in there with crimes of violence. We don't allow the drug dealers in there, the people that are really trying to expand this opiate epidemic we had. We're trying to touch the people who have the initiative and the desire to be cured, and as I said before, the low-risk individuals who aren't out there committing serious crime. The benefits, obviously, it provides an alternative to corrections. Again, it gives them a taste of corrections. I'll get into what happens after they finish the 28 days in a few minutes. Actually, I'll get into it now. I'm ahead of myself with the slides, but it does give them an alternative to go back in front of the judge and hopefully finish up their sentence in a couple of different means. Actually, before I get to that, just so you know, when someone comes in, a lot of times they need to detox. So that may take a number of days depending on the level of their addiction. We, as I said before, have correctional officers there for the security of the facility, but we contract out with experts, private companies. NAFCare is our provider up there. They provide all the medical treatment that's necessary, particularly during those few days of detox. They'll provide 24/7 coverage if there's anything they need. And then we have the psychological care, which is a company called AdCare. They also provide our treatment and our rehabilitation services. They run the programmings for us. They get the clients engaged and work with them so they succeed. And obviously we have emergency procedures. We're located in the town of Middleton. We're always doing training with them. God forbid we have a medical emergency inside. We want to make sure we get them the proper coverage as soon as possible. So they finish the 28-day program, back in front of the judge. The DAs are there, the defense attorneys, all the probation folks are there. We provide an individual report that goes along with the client back to the court. So how do they do with the programming? What do they do? What was their attitude? What do we think is going to happen? So there's two tracks they could do. Track one, they could re-enter back into the community. Judge may just put them right out. Maybe put them on a low cash bail, or just say, fine, I'm going to send you home. Keep your nose clean. Maybe put them on some type of probation. Maybe put them on an electronic bracelet. Maybe have them report to some of our officers of community corrections, which we do have one here in Lynn. The other two are in Lawrence and Salisbury, for routine drug testing or additional programming. There's a variety of options that the judge has that they work out with the individual as long as they were cooperative and they succeeded in what they did, what their goal was. Or we can send them to long-term sober houses. We do have a few of those in the county, which are very, very well maintained and well controlled. And most of the individuals in there are on bracelets, so we know where they are 24/7. Track two, maybe they weren't quite as successful as they wanted, or maybe they have other cases pending that might have come up within the court system, so we may send them to a different track. Maybe they come back to Middleton for some other issue, or maybe we send them up to the pre-release center, which is up in Lawrence, better known as the Farm along 495. Again, you can see the options we do there, but again, we're trying to just get them back as quickly as we can back into society, get them to reunite with their families. Hopefully they can go back to get the job they had or get another job and stay clean. Oops. Medically assisted treatment. There was a lot of talk about this at that criminal justice bill I mentioned a few minutes ago. For the last year or so, we have adopted one of the medically assisted treatments through the use of Vivitrol. Vivitrol is a shot that's administered monthly on a 30-day cycle. It actually blocks the receptors in the brain so the individuals don't crave getting high. So we actually will give it out to the inmates within 48 hours upon release. So they're good for 30 days, but they got to go back to another facility or a healthcare company to get the next shot and stay on that. Keep in mind, when somebody's leaving the jail, especially if they've been through their life has been really, really on the low downturn for a long time, They don't have a driver's license, they don't have health insurance, they don't have family, they don't have money, they don't have a job, they don't have a home. So before we release them, we try to get them up to speed as much as we can. We'll get them an ID through the Registry of Motor Vehicles. We'll get them signed up on Mass Health before they leave so they can get the shot. These shots are not cheap. They're well over $1,000 per shot, so Mass Health will cover them to do it. I'm going to get a little bit more into the education, some of the rehab stuff we do in a minute. This is one of the things we picked up upon about 6 months. I'm very proud to say, but you might have heard about the PARI organization, Police Assisted Addiction Recovery Initiative. It is up in Gloucester. It's been in operation for a couple, 3 years now. One of the things we did with them is we partnered up to obtain a grant through AmeriCorps. We have 2 recovery coaches, part-time, 1 male, 1 female, and I think Steve is here someplace. He's one of our coaches. Steve's in the back. Thank you very much, Steve. But the recovery coaches will come inside our institution. They'll work with the inmates before they leave. They develop a rapport. They communicate. They share contact information. So when they leave, the recovery coaches will help them be almost like an AA sponsor out in the community. They have somebody they can call if they're having a bad day or they think they might relapse, and the recovery coaches can help tie them into some services into the local communities. This is the one thing we just started this year. We're creating a new reentry unit up at the farm, again up in Lawrence along 495 the Merrimack River. Reentry is the big thing now. We're trying to put a lot of focus on. If somebody leaves jail, they're at 120 times greater chance to overdose than a normal person out in society. And overdose obviously means they also have a very substantial chance of dying. So we have to do a better job when they release the inmates from jails, whether it's a county jail or a state's prison, back to the community. We have to do a better job to tie them into services so they don't. And that's what we're really trying to focus on now. So we created a 72-bed unit. Actually, we're having a grand opening May 16th. If you have nothing else to do, you want to come up to Lawrence, come up and we'll give you a cup of coffee and a little tour. But we are pretty proud of it. We're reaching out to anybody in every organization we can to partner up, like the folks with the recovery coaches from PARI. A lot of the Lynn folks in this room, I know we partnered up before when I was chief. I know Chief Mageary is still continuing those services. Whatever we can so we can kind of bridge that gap so they don't recidivate, they don't go back to a life of crime, and more importantly, they don't put that needle back in their arm. Just quickly, and I'm almost done here, keep in mind, though, I talked about the detox program, but we also have a lot of other inmates inside Middleton on a daily basis, and a lot of them, as I said before, have substance abuse problems. So we're always doing programming at a different level for them. It's not as intensive as the detox, but these are folks who may be charged with crimes who are not eligible for the detox. So don't think we forgot about those folks. We're trying to cover all our bases. So these are some of the programs that we do on a routine basis in Middleton. The adult basic education, the HISET, the old GED program. Obviously, we're still doing treatment and recovery, alternatives to violence, drug and alcohol counseling, vocational training. We have a great barbering program up there. We teach the inmates before they leave OSHA skills, serve safe, they can work in the food industry, computer literacy. We have a new program now with fiber optic cabling. They can go out and do basic laboring for someone doing installations. Consumer education, financial literacy. They want to go into business. Believe it or not, some of them do. We've had some success stories. English as a second language, and Mother Read. Mother Read's pretty unique. We have the females in the detox itself. We also have a 24-bed minimum security facility up in Salisbury that we use. A lot of the women are up there too, so we take the whole Mother Read program so they can go home and they can read a book to their little one, which, believe it or not, a lot of them don't have that skill to do. So that's what we do while they're inside. This is what we're trying to do, is what I talked about with the reentry services that we're really trying to promote. So again, a little commercial message here. I'll be here for a while tonight, but if anybody has an organization or an agency that they want to partner up with us, please grab me afterwards. We'd love to have all the help we can get. Long-term residential sober housing, I talked about that before. We'll talk about maybe intensive outpatient program with some of those social service and the healthcare companies. I mentioned Officers of Community Corrections, Veteran Services. I know Mike Sweeney's in the back of the room from the Lynn Office of Veterans. If we have somebody coming out of Middleton, Mike, I know, will be right there at the end of a phone call if we need his service or our individual needs of services. 18 to 24-year-olds, that's the new age group. We're really trying to dump a bunch of services, but that's probably a much longer conversation for another day. But that's a group that's really kind of under the gun right now, where they're still developing their brains. So we're trying to put programming in there to make sure we're doing the right thing for what they need. Mental health support services, detox graduation, graduate continuation of services. I mentioned Vivitrol before. To ensure success, strong partnerships must be maintained. Community stakeholders, including the business community. Part of this reentry program we have is work release. We have 94 jobs now in the county. We deliver. So if you're an employer, by the way, another commercial message, please see me afterwards if you're interested. We'll bring you employees every day. We will deliver and pick up. You will pay them, a salary. We hold it in our accounts for them. So when the inmates are released, we give them their money back. So now at least they have a few bucks to get an apartment, so they're not living on the streets right away. But we take, and by the way, if you're a business owner, you get a little tax deduction. That's what's in it for you. But we do deliver all over the county. Every day the vans go out, drop off the inmates. We pick them up, bring them back, make sure they're clean, and make sure they're actually doing the job for you too. Faith-based groups, those are huge. We had a lot of success in Lynn with those. There's a variety of denominations out there, but a lot of them just want to help out. So we hook up the inmates. A lot of them get religion while they're inside, so if we can, we'll take advantage of it. And obviously the state agencies, Mass Department of Public Health, Mass Department of Mental Health, probation, parole, law enforcement partners, the courts, and academic and research partners. Anybody we can to help us out, it's huge. And the ultimate goal, saving lives and making our community safe. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Sheriff Coppinger. Our next presenter is Dr. Kiame Mahnaiah. His biography reads, inspired by a childhood divided between a war-affected third world country, the Congo, and a high-performing first world one, Switzerland, as well as parents intimately involved in rural development NGOs, Dr. Mahnaiah brings a burning passion for social justice and the fight against health disparities to his work as CEO. Dr. Mahnaiah attended medical school at Thomas Jefferson University in Philadelphia, is a National Health Service Corps Scholar, and graduate from the Family Medicine Residency Program at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center, SMMH, in 2000. He has been working in federally qualified community health centers ever since. He worked for nearly a decade at the Greater Lawrence Family Health Center in Lawrence, where he successfully served as faculty, site medical director, office-based opioid therapy program director, associate residency director, and associate chief medical officer. In 2012, he was elected chief of family medicine department for Lawrence General Hospital and joined the North Shore Community Health Center in Salem, senior management, as their first chief medical officer. In 2015, he became chief medical officer at Lynn Community Health Center, where he led the team that achieved patient-centered medical home Level 3 certification. His clinical interests lie in teaching. He holds an appointment at the Tufts University School of Medicine in integrating opioid addiction treatment into primary care. In 2017, he became the health center's chief executive officer. His twin administrative passions spring from a continuing quest for dignity, social justice for patients, and excellent jobs for employees. He was the 2012-2013 Massachusetts Academy of Family Medicine Physician of the Year. He is bilingual in French and English, fluent in German and Spanish, and conversant in Lingala. Did I say that correctly? In Lingala. There is nothing he enjoys more than a novel with complex characters and a complicated plot. It is my honor to welcome Dr. Mahnaiah.
The first thing I learned is that I need to make that bio way shorter. So I'll try to make this quick to be cognizant of time. So I'm still a practicing physician. For the past 10 years, virtually all my practice has been working with people who are struggling with substance use disorder. Which button do I push, Mary? And can you hear me in the back? Okay. So, and one of the other things that I do is that I teach substance use disorder treatment at the medical school at Tufts downtown. So in the medical field, we've switched to using the term substance use disorder, but until very recently, we just said addiction. So when you hear me say substance use disorder, you can also substitute addiction. So the question is why you've heard several speakers now, so why is quitting so hard? Why do people actually die? It's not like people who use drugs don't know that they could die from using the drugs, right? And actually, if you ask any of the law enforcement officers, they'll tell you that they sometimes go to the same place 3-4 times the same night with the same person overdosing, and over time they get to know them. So one of the reasons, so the question is essentially, why do people use to start with? So what I'm going to try to do is, so addiction is a complex problem. It has legal implication, it has criminal implications, and to some degree has spiritual implications. And I'm talking to you from a medical perspective, what we know and what we don't know. Unsurprisingly, most of what goes on in substance use disorder, we don't know. So what we do know is, on average, those of you sitting here are swimming in your pleasure centers. You have dopamines of about 100. That's where most people, on average, swim around. Now, when Sheriff Coppinger found out that he was going to be sheriff for the first time, his dopamine levels probably spiked to 130, right? Until he realized he was just taking on more pain, and then it went back down to 100. And the most pleasure that we're made to feel as human bodies is a sexual orgasm. That's the top amount of pleasure you can feel. And when you experience an orgasm, your pleasure, your dopamine levels can spike up to around 200, 250. When you use heroin, your pleasure centers spike up to 1,000. So the reason people use is that it makes you feel great. And I think we often forget to mention that. That's why people use. People use because you use that drug and it takes all your pain away. Not only does it take all your pain away, you feel like the most amazing version of you that there could possibly be. And so when Wendy comes to tell you, hey, that's the devil that you have in your house, you're thinking, no, I found God and I've chained him in the basement, and anytime I pray, he answers, right? And that's why it's so difficult to quit. Not only that, but your brain actually changes. We can actually, when we put people in PET scanners, we can see that the brain response changes. And so if you use for long enough, you lose the ability to say no. You lose the ability that the thing that you as a husband, as you're watching TV, and your wife comes to tell you, hey, I need to talk to you about something serious, the thing in your brain that makes you not point the clicker at her and click mute, right? That's that thing that tells you something bad is going to happen. Essentially, when you start using drugs, your brain changes to the point where you can no longer, the part of your brain that makes you stop from doing something because of consequences no longer exists. You lose the ability to respect the consequences of your actions. And it's too far for you guys to see, but here you have, this is for methamphetamine users, because methamphetamine users are particularly interesting because the pleasure centers can go up to 1,800 to 2,000 with methamphetamine. Amazing the potency. So you can see this is what your brain looks like when you're trying to make a decision as a person who's sober. And this is what happens after a month of abstinence. You can see that there's whole parts of your brain that are missing and not firing. But the good news is, if you stay in treatment long enough, your brain starts looking normal. We know from smokers that it takes about 7 years for your brain to look like a non-smoker. You need about 7 years of complete sobriety from tobacco, from your brain to not be distinguishable with a PET scan. So these are real changes that happen in people's brains. So let me just go back here. We don't know why people start using. There's things that obviously put you at increased risk right? But that's like saying, what are you more at risk of when you're crossing the street? Is it better to cross the street in sneakers or in high heels? Which is most likely to cause you to fall? Probably high heels. But are you going to fall every time you cross the street when you're wearing high heels? No, it's just a probability. And it's the same thing with drug use. We know that being abused as a child increases your chance. We know that being sexually abused increases your chance. We know that seeing one of your parents being hit by the other increases your chance. We know that if someone commits suicide in your family, it increases your chance. We know if somebody in your family goes to prison, it increases your chance. There's all these things that we know about that increases your chance of using drugs and becoming dependent. But we can't tell you, oh, you will become dependent, you will not become dependent. And one of the fascinating things is only about 20% of people who try and use drugs, even on a regular basis, become dependent on the drug. Only about 20%. And each person's brain is different. Just because you love cocaine doesn't mean that you're going to love methamphetamine or that you're going to love heroin or that you're going to love alcohol. So people's brains are made for specific drugs. The closest you can come to know whether or not you're at risk is to just anybody in your family who's ever suffered from addiction. If anybody in your family has ever suffered from addiction, your chance of becoming dependent on the drug skyrockets. It's one of the toughest things, the toughest conversations that I have with my patients, and I know that Wendy has with her patients, is you have to talk to your families. Because what do teenagers do? Teenagers experiment. That's what teenagers do. That's what teenage brains are made for, right? Except that if your father is a recovering heroin user or a recovering alcoholic, you cannot experiment because your brain might just be the superhighway to dependencies. So this is very difficult because people are dealing with their own sobriety and then you're telling them, go talk to your kids. That's a difficult one. So defining success. So the world of substance use disorder treatment is sort of divided along a spectrum. On what spectrum, at what end of the spectrum you have complete sobriety, and at the other end of the spectrum you have harm reduction. And everybody who deals with substance use disorder falls somewhere on that spectrum. So I see Mary Wheeler out there. So Mary Wheeler is on the total harm reduction spectrum over here, right? Harm reduction means that you've decided that given that most people use drugs for 10 to 20 years before they can experience successful treatment, your job is to keep people alive until they're ready to go for treatment. And so what does that entail? For instance, that entails using Narcan. You guys have all heard of Narcan. Narcan essentially is like a defibrillator for addiction, right? You see somebody, they're down, they're not breathing, you give them Narcan, it brings them up. It doesn't do anything to treat them. Just like when you use a defibrillator to bring somebody back, it doesn't do anything to treat the actual heart disease that's causing it. But Narcan allows them to survive. Another thing that on the harm reduction side that we advocate is needle exchange. Why do we advocate needle exchange? It's because we know that if we don't do needle exchanges, people are going to end up getting HIV and Hep C and all the other diseases. And because people are not isolated, are interacting with the rest of society, if you have a group of population that develops HIV, eventually your whole community is going to be affected and start getting HIV. Right? We like to pretend that addicts or people who use are these other category that don't interact with us, but in reality they're not. They interact with us every day. And so what works for treatment? So when I talk about success, I mean that a patient has been coming at least once a month to our clinic on Union Street, and they give drug screens, and the drug screens are sober, and they've dealt with their legal problems, and they're moving towards becoming a functional member of society, meaning they're trying to do the right thing for their kids, they're trying to get work, they're getting their driver's license back, right, all those kind of things. And if you simply go cold turkey, I'll sort of take numbers. What do you think the number is if you just do the Nancy Reagan thing and just say no, and you just say no and that's it? What do you think the success is? Out of 100 people, how many people would still be sober after a year? It's in the single digits, 2 or 3%. How about if you go sit on Wendy's couch every day and she counsels you about how to be sober? What do you think your success rate jumps to? The best programs are probably between 15 and 20%. That meaning that 1 year, about 20 people of 100 will be sober. How about if you add buprenorphine, which is commonly known as Suboxone? What do you think your success rate goes to? Around 60, 65%, and methadone is about 5 to 10% above that. And Vivitrol, we're not quite sure yet because there's only one great study that's come out so far, but the Vivitrol is around 55, 52, 53%, right? Now you're thinking to yourself, oh, that's terrible. But actually, that's about the rate that we have for our diabetics and our hypertensives. Meaning that if you just came to our health center, and of all the people with high blood pressure, how many after 5 years have their blood pressure controlled? It's around 65, 70%. People just have a really hard time changing their life, right? You know you shouldn't eat those French fries, but if I did a show of hands, I bet 3/4 of you had French fries in the past month, right? But I won't embarrass you with that. So how does treatment work? I think it was it Sheriff Coppinger that talked about the blocking, what the way Vivitrol works? Yeah, so Vivitrol essentially just sits on top of your pleasure receptor and says, no go, you can't come in. So you can't feel any pleasure. So you could use heroin, you could use Percocet, nothing would happen. It's just be blocked. Methadone is on the other side of things. What methadone does is it goes to those pleasure receptors and makes you feel the pleasure that you used to feel, except that you level off after a certain amount of time, and so then you can function. And Suboxone is between the two. I can answer questions later. It gets if you guys want to geek out, it gets somewhat complicated, but you get far less euphoria getting high with Suboxone than with methadone. And after about a few weeks, you no longer feel any euphoria with Suboxone. So why not just wait the 20 years until people are ready to quit? Why bother with this treatment? Why do we hear from our district attorney and from our sheriff that there's all these efforts that are going on? It's because people die. That's why. People die. The chance of you dying if you use heroin is 40 times higher than a person who doesn't use heroin. And we know from our studies that for every about 10,000 treatment spots that you put in, you're dropping the death rate. And if you die, you'll never be able to be successfully treated. So that's why we push harm reduction. We push trying to reach people where they're at. That's why we're doing outreach where you go talk to people as they're using or as they're coming down from the use, because our goal is to try to keep people alive, and that's what treatment does. And harm reduction doesn't mean that you're accepting the drug use. Harm reduction means you're accepting that they're struggling with the drug use, but you realize that your main goal is to keep them alive until they're ready for treatment. And I think the crucial thing is we saw first happening in Gloucester, which means that the only way we can accept to be able to treat patients is if we realize that it's not them. As human beings, we're programmed to decide that there's us and there's them. That's what we do. We're tribal people as human beings. We're always slicing and pushing people out. And I think the big shift that has happened over the past 10 years is that as a society, we've moved from deciding that people who use are them, and we've decided that they are us, and that we're all in it together. I show this slide. You guys can't see the numbers, but essentially it shows that in terms of the rate of increase in the last 10 years, it doesn't matter what the household income is. If you track which population has increased their use, it doesn't matter how much money there is in the community. It's hitting all the communities. And if you look at race, in terms of who are the people that have really increased over the past 10 years, you can see that in non-white people, there's been not much of an increase, right? The big increase has been among white people. That's really where the big increase in opioid use has happened. And you can from insurance, it also doesn't matter. We tend to think of it as what's a poor people problem or a Medicaid or mass health problem. Actually, the big growth that's happening is people who have private insurance. Our program on Union Street is where we treat about 550 patients. It's a program with the highest percentage of private pay patients in our system, right? And they come to us because they can't find treatment. And my last picture is just to show you that it's affecting everybody in the nation. I often joke with my students that this map was drawn by a Democrat because red is bad and blue is good. So red means that at least 2.5% of your population is currently using opioids. So you can see that in Massachusetts, we're a red state. But if I showed you a map of methamphetamine use, it'd be the exact opposite. The middle part of the country would light up, and the borders would go dark. So this is a problem that affects all of us. And it's a problem, and the problem is even if we could find a magic bullet to stop, so we say starting from today, there's no more new addict, there's no more new substance use disorder, it would still take us 20 years to deal with the epidemic that we have. So we're in this for the long run. My job is figuring out how to treat people, but I always tell my students, really what we need to figure out as a society is how are we going to stop people from starting to use and becoming dependent on the drugs. My favorite example is car accidents. 30 years ago, the way people died in car accident is that the engine block pushed the steering wheel and crushed your sternum and you died, right? That's what killed people in car accidents. What happens now is that we've built cars so that when you have an accident, it just crumbles around you and you don't get killed by the engine block. We're not actually in less accidents, we just have safer cars. So the question I have for us in general as a society, what's the equivalent for the opioid epidemic of a safer car? Like, what does it mean? What do we need to do as a society? How do we need to treat each other? How do we need to bring up our children? What do we need to change in order for that to change? And that nobody really has the answer to. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Mahnaiah. Our next presenter will be Wendy Kent. She's a Director of Behavioral Health and Prevention Programs at Bridgewell. Wendy Kent received her master's degree in clinical psychology in 1982. She is currently the Director of Behavioral Health and Prevention Programs at Bridgewell. She has worked as a treatment provider in the field of addiction for 38 years, working with adults and adolescents in a variety of settings, including outpatient, inpatient, and residential treatment. She's been working in the Lynn community for the past 30 years, providing direct care to individuals with substance use disorders and managing outpatient behavioral health services. Since 2003, she has simultaneously been involved in prevention initiatives in the city of Lynn, with an emphasis on opioid overdose prevention and the prevention of prescription drug misuse in youth. The newest program she oversees is a recovery coach program that provides support, referral, and follow-up care to overdose victims in the ED at Union Hospital. It's my honor to welcome Wendy Kent.
Good evening, and thank you all for coming here tonight. As was mentioned in my bio, I am simultaneously working in prevention and intervention and have for a long time. And this provides me with a unique opportunity to integrate prevention into treatment and my knowledge of addiction and treatment into prevention. And it was interesting because over the years, as there have been more statewide initiatives addressing the opioid issue, when I began to encounter more prevention specialists that were charged with trying to prevent overdoses and opioid use, I was surprised at the number of people in that field that really knew nothing about opioid use disorders and addiction per se. So they had to get an education very, very quickly. When I started in this business in 1980, it was a very different world. We were dealing with mostly alcohol and cocaine. Of course, I was very young and naive at that point and sort of didn't see this as complicated as it is. But you fast forward 20 or so years, and the explosion of heroin misuse and prescription drug misuse or prescription opioid use in the city really changed and complicated what we had to do. We started getting involved with prevention work in Lynn with the City of Lynn and in concert with a large number of community partners, including other providers, including the police, including the schools. I mean, the list goes on, because we knew that this was not something that we could do in isolation or by ourselves. So when we first started, we were doing a lot more general prevention work, targeting youth and families, mostly focusing on easy access to alcohol and, trying to educate families and youth about the risk factors that contributed to substance use disorders and what resources and supports were in place to protect them from these issues. In 2008, we received funding from the Department of Public Health that allowed us to specifically address opioid overdose prevention. And again, we had to work with this as part of a team of community providers. But the interesting thing for me was that because my background was in treatment, I approached it differently than a lot of other prevention specialists do. And we were actually fortunate that because we were sort of provider heavy with our early intervention efforts, we had more of an understanding of addiction, which allowed us to sort of get started more quickly than some of the other communities were able to do. But there's a lot of work going on statewide, and they have caught up. When we got involved in opioid prevention work and overdose prevention work in 2008, initially we were looking at educating those most at risk of overdosing on overdose risk recognition, response, prevention, targeting people that were coming out of detox, coming out of jail, had periods of sobriety, whose tolerance was down and were most likely to overdose. We were also doing a lot of work early on with the medical community, because at that point in time, their understanding, I mean, we're going back 10, 12 years now, their understanding of addiction was not what it is now. They've come a long way in that regard. And it was quite surprising to a lot of physicians that we talked to that people were actually diverting their prescription medications to the street. So there was a lot of work in that area and really pushing for changes in prescribing practices, really changing for education about addiction within the medical community and helping them to understand diversion. A few years after that, we became part of a cluster. So the Department of Public Health expanded the network that we needed to work with. So not only were we doing this work in Lynn, but we were doing it in Salem and Peabody as well. Unfortunately, we didn't get more money in order to do this. We had to do this with the same amount of money, but it really involved partnering and bringing more people into this process. Despite the work that was being done, the numbers continued to increase. And so we had to really shift to a reaction mode. And I'm sure the chief will talk a little bit about the data, but in 2009, there were roughly 60 police-involved incidents involving overdoses. Fast forward to 2017, there were over 500. So this is not all the overdose incidents. This is only the individuals that where 911 was called or the police were involved in some capacity. It doesn't include all the individuals that just went straight to the hospital, circumvented the 911 system, or never reported it at all, were revived with Narcan and then just went about their business. So at that point, the focus became more concentrated on increasing access to Narcan. And because there were a lot of things going on at the state level in terms of prevention initiatives, it was really work that all the communities in the Commonwealth were doing that really contributed to both changes in legislation from the Baker administration that put more restrictions on prescribing, as well as increase the availability of Narcan. You don't have to have a prescription to access Narcan. You can walk into any pharmacy and purchase it. So this made it available to so many more people. The other area that we really had to expand on because of the increasing numbers was outreach to overdose victims. In the early days, they would go to the ER, they would be medically cleared, and they'd be sent on their way. So we really wanted there to be more follow-up in place. And there's a lot of this that's going on in the city. Healthy Streets does outreach with this population. The Lynn Police Department's Behavioral Health Unit does this work as well, and now we're able to do it through funding from North Shore Medical Center. We're able to provide recovery coaches on call to the emergency room at Union Hospital on a 24/7 basis to respond and support an individual who's overdosed. And we are working towards expanding this to Salem Hospital as well. The numbers went up because, as everyone has heard through the news, widespread availability of fentanyl in this community. It is saturated with it. So we're dealing with something that's far more potent. We still face a lot of challenges with outreach to overdose victims because they are not easy to access sometimes. They're afraid. They're sick, they're not feeling well, they're in withdrawal, and they're struggling. We are limited by privacy regulations that make it very difficult for different organizations that are working with an individual to be able to share information and collaborate on interventions. And it's not that I'm advocating for less privacy regulations, because those are important, but it is a barrier that we run into a great deal. But all the while we're doing this in our reactive mode and having to address the rising numbers and the number of high-risk individuals, we are also having to be proactive with primary prevention. And that is challenging, and that also requires a collaborative effort. And we have to work really closely with the schools and with families and youth and, you know, the recovering community, as well as individuals that are still actively struggling with substance use, because every one of those individuals is a resource to us and a source of information and ideas and creative strategies. And this is something that really has to continue. The other area, and the district attorney's discussion about the All-Stars program is a perfect example of an opportunity to do some primary prevention. The program is working with middle school age kids, mostly 6th and 7th graders primarily, and we're really trying to interrupt that process as early as we possibly can, and it's difficult. One of the things that we're working on right now is looking at 4 years of Lynn Police data and 2 years of Salem Police data. And we're exploring that as extensively as we possibly can. And it's a lot of information, and we have some very rich databases. But we're trying to use this information to identify trends and to identify what's behind those trends, so that we can gear further and future prevention and intervention efforts based on what the data is telling us. But it's really complicated, because who's overdosing? It runs the gamut. You have individuals who are 19, 20, 21 years old overdosing, many of them very inexperienced with using opioids and not really understanding what they're dealing with and the risks. We have people in their 60s and 70s. Some of them are people who have long-standing issues with substance use and misuse, and maybe just use episodically, or have misused substances for a long time and are medically compromised and therefore more vulnerable to overdose. And then you have everybody that falls in between. We're also seeing, and I'm sure the police will talk about this as well, we're also seeing people unknowingly using heroin and fentanyl, thinking that they've purchased cocaine, or they've purchased fentanyl or cocaine that's cut with fentanyl, or marijuana cut with fentanyl, or the list goes on and on. So there are a lot of people in an overdose situation will swear on a stack of Bibles that they did not use heroin or fentanyl, but they may have unknowingly done that. And last year in 2017, the highest incidence of fatal and non-fatal overdoses in Lynn was in the 31 to 40 age. So obviously we have them on either side, and that's been sort of the primary age throughout the last several years. Men and women are overdosing, but the rates vary. The rate of overdoses among men is about, men versus women is about 2 to 1, and the rate of fatal overdoses is about 3 to 1, male to female. Why? We don't know, and that's part of what this data analysis is important in order for us to understand what might be contributing to this. Historically, most overdose victims are white, non-Hispanic individuals, but we're beginning to see a little bit of an increase in the number of members of the Latino community that are overdosing as well. So that's beginning to change. Again, why? We don't know, but we want to identify what's behind that. We're really trying to look closely at the link between the marketplace and the individuals that are involved and the interconnections between local communities, particularly Lynn and Salem, because a lot of trends that we see in Lynn follow a few months later in Salem. And we're also looking at locations where these occur. One of the things that the data pointed out to us very clearly, that one of the biggest risk factors, and this shouldn't come as a surprise, but one of the biggest risk factors for an overdose is using alone. For obvious reason. If you're alone, there's no one to call 911, there's no one to give you Narcan, there's no one available to support you in that situation. But what we've also seen is that individuals using alone at home in their parents' home are also at very high risk of dying, because if their parents are not aware that they're using in their bedroom, and then they, to their horror, they discover them dead the next morning. You know, this is why we have to educate families about this, that just because your adult child is now drug-free and sober and seemingly doing well, a reoccurrence can occur, a relapse can occur, and they might not survive it. I think that the most important thing that I can stress, and I say this all the time, this is not a law enforcement issue. This is not a medical community issue. This is an everyone issue. This is a community-based public health problem, and it has to be addressed as such. It requires all sectors of the community to be involved, and I've listed a lot of those already in terms of city officials, the police, treatment providers, the business community, schools, parents, youth, the recovering community, and as I indicated before, even people who are still struggling with this disorder and actively using. We have to maximize opportunities to have ongoing discussions about this disorder and begin to normalize the conversation, because too often I talk with parents whose heads are still in the sand and say, this is not going to happen to my child. My kid is a good kid. I'm a good parent. We see it all the time. Individuals who were raised in homes where everybody did all the things that you're supposed to do to raise your kids to be healthy, functioning adults, and it just doesn't always work. You know, Kiame talked about just how unpredictable it is. You can identify risk factors, but that's not a guarantee that someone's going to be a problem or develop a problem, and the absence of risk factors is not a guarantee that someone's not going to develop an addiction. I spend a lot of time encouraging parents to ask their, you know, when they take their child to the doctor, or when they go to the doctor and they go to the dentist, push back, ask questions. Don't just accept a medication just because it's prescribed. You need to have a dialogue. You need to have a better understanding of what this medication does. But most importantly, we need to stress that parents should never, ever underestimate the risks. Never say that everybody experiments and my kids will outgrow this. Never underestimate the potential for their child developing a disorder, because there are far too many parents who have buried their children, and this was the last thing that they ever expected to have happen. So, thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. And our final presenter for the evening before we open our forum to a question and answer from you is our police chief, Michael Mageary. Born and raised in Lynn, Massachusetts, Chief Mageary is his 32nd year with the Lynn Police Department. Chief Mageary began his career as a patrolman in 1986. Prior to his appointment to the position of Chief of Police, Chief Mageary served a variety of roles and ranks within the department. As a sergeant, he was supervisor of the Day Division. As a lieutenant, he was assigned as a special projects coordinator and to the deputy chief, and then was appointed to the head of Youth Services Unit, where he helped develop and initiate the high successful School Resource Officer Program in the Lynn Police Summer Student Academy. In 2005, Chief Mageary was promoted to the rank of captain, serving as the administrative captain prior to being assigned as the captain of professional standards. In 2014, Chief Mageary was promoted to the rank of Deputy Chief of Administration, where he was responsible for overseeing the efforts of the Professional Standards Division, Administrative Division, and the Support Services Division, as well as supervising the hiring of new officers, amongst other responsibilities. In March of 2017, Michael Mageary was appointed to his current position as Chief of Police for the City of Lynn. Chief Mageary graduated from Salem State University with a Bachelor of Science degree in Political Science in 1990. In 1992, he graduated from Anna Maria College with a Master of Arts degree in Criminal Justice. He is also a graduate of the Police Executive Research Forum's Senior Management Institute of Policing, the FBI LEEDA Executive Leadership Program, and the Massachusetts Police Leadership Institute. Throughout his career, Chief Mageary has received 9 departmental commendations for outstanding police work and was the recipient of a Life-Saving Award from the City of Lynn Council and a Mass Corps President's Award for life-saving effort for 2 separate incidents. Chief Mageary has been married to his wife Lisa for 27 years, and they have 2 children, a daughter Jennifer, who's 26, and a son Brendan, 23. The chief is very active in his community and has volunteered his time with numerous organizations, including Wyoming Little League, Greater Lynn Babe Ruth, East Lynn Pup Warner, and Lynn Youth Hockey. He has been recognized for his efforts and is a strong proponent of community engagement. It's my honor to welcome Chief Mageary.
The bio is probably longer than my presentation, but I just want to give you people here tonight, and I want to thank you all for coming because I truly feel this is a community issue that impacts everyone. An overview of what we do in the department in a number of areas. So, again, thank you for coming. The opioid crisis, in my opinion, is one of the most difficult issues facing police and society today, and requires a multifaceted approach of enforcement, treatment and education, and prevention. I just want to let you know, we've been ahead of the curve for a long time with this. Since the early 90s, we've been collecting data, which began with Chief John Suslak many years ago, and then continued with the sheriff, and then Chief Coppinger. We began compiling statistics on overdoses. This is from 2003 to present through the month of April. As you can see, in 2003, well, you can't see, there were 107 total overdoses, and I believe there were 15 deaths. Now you look over here at 2017, it was 501, and in 2018 we're at 147, with currently 17 overdose deaths. We are already ahead of the curve for overdoses for this year. The one good point that you can see is in heroin overdose deaths for the year, we're currently down 19% in the deaths. So our focus is on outreach, education, and enforcement. All officers in our department have been trained in the use of Narcan, and they have it in the field. In 2017, our department utilized Narcan themselves 78 times. And to date, in 2018, we've utilized it 16 times. That does not include the fire department or ambulance. Just utilization from the Lynn Police Department is where we're at right there. Since 1994, we have a policy in place. All overdoses, both fatal and non-fatal, are investigated by a detective from our Criminal Investigation Division. This is the beginning of our outreach as we try to determine the source of the drugs, while also providing information to the victims regarding our behavioral health unit and our PARI recovery coaches. The Behavioral Health Unit was formed in 2014 on the premise that prevalence of mental illness and substance abuse problems in Lynn are a driving force behind many crimes and arrests in the city. Currently, the BHU is comprised of 2 clinicians from Lynn Community Health Services. Leanne Magnarelli focuses on substance abuse, and I believe she's still here. There you are, back there. So if anyone has any questions for the BHU afterwards, she'll be around to answer them. We also have Jennifer Wiskowski, who concentrates on jail diversion. Police officers, during the performance of their duties, deal with individuals who have mental health illness and substance abuse issues on a daily basis. Officers are faced with making a decision to arrest an individual, oftentimes for minor offenses, when the need for many of these individuals is increased mental health and substance abuse services. And let me stress this. The goal is to keep people out of jail and to get people connected with the appropriate services that they truly need. That is our goal. In 2017, our department joined the Police Assisted Addiction and Recovery Initiative and received an AmeriCorps grant to bring on 2 part-time recovery coaches. Lynn was selected to increase our efforts in preventing overdose deaths and providing services to community members with substance abuse disorders. Again, the goal is to connect individuals with the treatment and recovery services that divert them from the criminal justice system. And both Cody and Erin are our new recovery coaches, and they have office in the Behavioral Health Unit. The Behavioral Health Unit is embedded in our station. When our officers walk through the back door every day or after a call and there's an issue, they take a left-hand turn, they can walk right in there, talk to Leanne, talk to Jen, Cody, etc., tell them what's going on, and find out what services we can give to a victim. In 2017, there were 610 referrals to the BHU in Perry, with approximately 41% of receiving some type of follow-up and support. We had some promising information between the months of September and December, where over 50% of the referrals, or people who sought help from the BHU, continued on with those services. And obviously, we're hoping to increase that amount of individuals who seek service. Just touching on some of our educational programs. In the middle schools, we have our SROs, who teach a great program, which has a drug prevention component as well. You've heard the district attorney speak about the Breed All-Star program, and I see Lauren and Kristen and whatever, and I've seen the success that has. That's another group that deals with at-risk youth for substance abuse. We have Tim Ferrari and his Project Yes program over the Marshall Middle School, another one that's doing great work. And we also partner with Girls Incorporated, who does substance abuse and prevention training throughout the city as well. Now, obviously, we want the victims of this epidemic to get their treatment, but there are people out there that are selling drugs that need to be arrested. And we have an enforcement piece to our job as well. We have the Lynn Drug Task Force. Sergeant Avery, you still here? Sergeant Avery's in charge of our Lynn Drug Task Force. Very aggressive young officer. We've been doing some really good work when it comes to that. We have another officer that's assigned as a task force member to the DEA, which at times we're able to leverage assets from the DEA to come in here to do some investigative work, make some seizures, etc. In 2017, 2,549 grams of heroin and fentanyl was seized in the city of Lynn. Over $100,000 worth of opiate pills and $88,000 in cash. In 2018, to date, we've already seized 2,718 grams of heroin and fentanyl, another $28,000 worth of opiate pills, and $155,000 approximately in cash. We have seen a significant increase in seizures of pure fentanyl in this city. And almost all the heroin that is seized has been testing positive for fentanyl. I know Wendy commented earlier about cocaine. We're seeing that as well. They're starting to use it in their cocaine, marijuana. We have not seen any seizures of carfentanil. But just for an illustrative point, fentanyl is 40 times more powerful than heroin. So we recognize it has to be a multi-collaborative effort. It requires a concerted effort from the police, the courts, corrections, healthcare providers, and community leaders. We're only going to make progress if we work together on multidisciplinary approaches. And this is the big one right here. This isn't just a police problem. It's a community challenge for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. In just a minute, we'll begin the question and answer portion of the program, but I just wanted to touch on a little bit about the city. Because during the campaign, a lot of the questions were, for me, directed towards me, was what the city was doing to take an approach. And I think I just want to echo a lot of the panelists' comments that it needs to be a combined effort. And I truly believe that the city does play a specific role in doing that, whether it's recognizing grants that are available for those that need support, or for the police to provide enforcement, to increase that enforcement part of it. But there are all several different aspects and different roles that the city, and certainly the city council and the mayor's office can offer for support and leadership. And I think as a councilor within the city, it's my obligation as chair of the opioid subcommittee to continue with these panels. I hope today was helpful. I think it's my obligation as chair to organize such panels of professionals that are providing services within the city so that they're recognized, they're identified, and they share their information. As you heard, they have years and years of experience, more than any of us are able to recognize. But I think on a personal level, I think, when I spoke to Darren back in November, a council president, and I shared with him some stories just personally. First and foremost, as a funeral director within the city for over 20 years now, I see the epidemic firsthand, and I see how it's affected families personally. When we're meeting with families, and I use this example where someone's burying a 90-year-old parent, and it's become a celebration of life almost, where family members they're almost relieved. And they talk about what a good life Mom had, and she outlived all her siblings, and certainly one of the most challenging areas of funeral service for a funeral director is when someone's burying their child. And whether it's disease or what, it's certainly a challenge for them, and it's certainly a challenge for us, because it's a very intimate time for us to be able to provide our service to them and the community. And over these past 20 years, it's almost kind of, that role when it comes to opioid deaths has kind of changed a little bit. And there's really nothing more upsetting than to sit with a family who's burying their child from an opioid-related death, and they have that same look of relief that they would for a parent that's 90 years old. And that's really professionally what's challenged me. And to take kind of more of a lead role on the council, and that's what my request was. I've seen parents really challenged by it, and again, it's a community issue. I've seen friends. We've talked about how addiction works, and a little bit more personal for me. I know I've never acknowledged it publicly, but personally. Over 20 years ago, when I was faced with just a simple impacted wisdom teeth, there was a disagreement between the insurance company and my doctor, and I began with a prescription of Vicodin, and that prescription was given to me by my doctor. It was recommended that I take, I believe it was a pill every 6 hours to deal with the pain. And after a month, still having challenges with the insurance company, that increased. It increased to a Vicodin extra strength, I remember. And at the recommendation of my doctor, it was every 4 hours now. So these situations years ago were real. It was real for me, it was real for my friends that were dealing with sports injuries, with wisdom teeth, whatever the problem. After 3 months, I recognized that I was addicted to prescription medication. It was trusting a doctor who was trusting a pharmaceutical company. And I recognized it early on, and I'm thankful that I was able to recognize that early on, because there are a lot of friends and folks that are here tonight that personally I know, it affected them more deeply than it did myself. Last Monday, Mayor McGee announced, and I'll read right from the announcement, Lynn joins communities in holding drug companies accountable for influx and prescription opioids in the city. Mayor Thomas McGee announced today that the City of Lynn has joined a growing list of communities in a public nuisance lawsuit to hold prescription opioid manufacturers and wholesale distributors accountable for their role in the fueling the current opioid epidemic. The lawsuit is against the 5 largest manufacturers of prescription opioids and their related companies, as well as against the country's 3 largest wholesale drug distributors. Drug companies and wholesale distributors have made billions of dollars pushing the use of prescription opioids. These companies need to be held accountable for their role in the opioid epidemic, which has spun out of control across the nation and greatly impacted our city, said Mayor McGee. Nothing can replace the families that have been ripped apart or the lives lost to opioid addiction, but we must do everything in our power to turn the tide and prevent further addiction and loss. In 1970, Congress designed a system to control the value of our opioid pills being distributed in the country because of prescription opioids are a highly addictive substance. It let only a select few wholesalers gain the right to deliver opioids. In exchange, those companies agreed to do a very important job, halt suspicious orders, and control against the diversion of these dangerous drugs to illegitimate uses. But in recent years, they have failed to do that. Lynn, along with other communities in Massachusetts and across the country, is working with a consortium of law firms to hold pharmaceutical drug manufacturers and wholesale distributors accountable for failing to do what they were charged and doing under the Federal Controlled Substance Act: monitor, identify, and report suspicious activity in the size and the frequency of opioid shipments to pharmacies and hospitals. The manufacturing companies pushed highly addictive and dangerous opioids, falsely representing to doctors that patients would only rarely succumb to drug addiction. Opioids are now the most prescribed class of drugs in the sales in the United States and have exceeded $8 billion in revenue annually since 2009. Opioid abuse is currently the leading cause of death of those under 50. In addition to the cost in human life, researchers estimate the total cost economic burden to the prescription opioid epidemic at $78.5 billion. According to the Massachusetts Department of Public Health, in 2017, 1,977 people lost their lives due to opioid-related overdose deaths in the state. No taxpayer money is being used under this lawsuit. All costs associated with the lawsuit paid through any litigation settlement. And again, so I know that the city needs to be involved. The city will be involved. And one of those ways is through the health department as well. And it's my honor now to introduce my co-chair, Michele Desmarais, Public Health Director for the City of Lynn.
I think we all need to give an applause to Councilor Field for his story and for setting this up for tonight. He did a lot of hard work. Thank you. As we take in the information presented tonight, we need to step back and reframe the question: how can we promote healthy behavior for all? Where do we start? Is it with education in schools, starting with grade 5, or earlier with decision-making building skills? Homelessness and other populations at risk, criminal justice reform, anti-stigma campaigns, physician training and mandatory checks for narcotic prescriptions, pain management and alternative medicine, mental health training and mental health resources availability, recovery coaches and behavioral health support, needle exchange sites, post-treatment support. It's imperative to understand the connection between health determinants and the challenges in the resources. Substance use has to be treated as a medical disease, and understanding that there is a need to ensure that all communities have access to resources that are available and financially sustained. Community collaboration allows us all of us to work together as we continue to battle this disease. I would like to thank you all for coming tonight, not only to listen, but I encourage you to not give up the fight and continue to meet the challenge head on. Thank you. At this time, I do think we have a few minutes for questions for the panel. If you'd come to the podium.
Hello. I first want to appreciate the longevity of every presenter here tonight who has been working at the front lines in a very difficult and ever-changing challenge of this world of addiction. I really am finding that the idea of HIPAA and privacy is a barrier in this particular issue, and I can't agree with Ms. Kent more in terms of advocating for a way to share information, because there are many aspects where people enter the various systems, whether it's incarceration or arrest or treatment and relapse. But I want to pose a question for the panelists in terms of how legalization of marijuana will further complicate the challenges that we're talking about tonight. I work as an outpatient provider, and so many people tell me that at 12 and 13 it was cigarettes, alcohol, and marijuana that opened the door. And I'm just curious.
Any of the panelists? Again, we are covered on Lynn Community Television, so any of the panelists that choose to answer the question, I'll ask that you just direct your answer into the microphone so that the audience at home is able to hear as well.
This is Kiame Mahnaiah from the Lynn Community Health Center. I think it's one of those categories where, from a scientific perspective, we just don't know. Like, the data out of Colorado is pretty conflicting. We don't know if legalizing marijuana means that more kids will use. We just don't know. From just a pure research standpoint, we don't have the answers yet. That doesn't answer your question from an ethical or moral or political or legal or criminal perspective, but just in terms of just pure data, there's not agreement that there's no data yet for us to be able to answer that question. Does legalizing marijuana make the problem better or worse? There's some data that suggests that for people in chronic pain, actually being on marijuana decreases the amount of opioids that they use. But is marijuana purely a gateway drug? It's a tricky thing because almost everybody has to start somewhere, right? But a crushing majority of people who do start with marijuana don't end up progressing to anything else. In a way, it's like marriage, right? You could think of divorce, that marriage is a gateway drug to divorce, right? You have to be married to get divorced. But nobody in the right mind would think that marriage causes divorce, right? But, so that it's a long answer to saying that from the medical community perspective, that's an unsettled question. I don't know what it's like from the the law enforcement community, what data they're dealing with, because they may be they deal with a different subsection of the problem from what I see.
Thank you, sir.
There are other questions. Please come right ahead to the podium again, because of the audience at home. They'll be able to hear your question, please.
Question, like 1 minute?
Sure, Jeffrey. Yeah, come right to the podium.
I promise to be brief, not make a big honest to God, the whole truth, nothing but truth, so help me God. Jeffrey Eric Yoffer from 500 Essex Street, number 16 in Lynn, Massachusetts. And I had asked Mr. Trahan, William Trahan, when he was on the Lynn City Council, if I may be the stenographer for the Never Making Marijuana Legal project that we've been working on. And we had guest speakers in council, in chambers, honest to God, in this room, okay? And they were asked to speak. And the first one, Chief Coppinger, who spoke, he got up and he explained to everybody. You know, everybody knows this part I'm saying first. Everybody knows there has been social crisis with marijuana, unfortunately, okay? But Chief Coppinger explained, he said, if you listen carefully, and I believe these are his exact words almost to the T, right? Which means maybe 1 or 2 words off, but no change in meaning, that if we ever called it legal, we would increase the cash flow by 10 times, thus making the crime rate 10 times more. Now, you know, making the crime rate 10 times more means that the problem is 10 times more. And also, printing capital money to make marijuana is, you know, unfortunately not a good idea. So, you know, simple problem solving. We were all brought up in an educated society. We weren't brought up that we increase the problem, make a problem 10 times worse to make it better. We solve it by reducing the problem.
Thank you, Jeff.
Okay, well, just one more point. Chief McDonald spoke right after him of the fire department still. And he got up and he said, I 100% agree with everything that Chief Coppinger said. And I was asked to be a presenter too. And I told a story about 2 kids driving down the road high on marijuana that almost drove through a bridge and died. And I had said, please don't vote to make our children dead by voting for more marijuana. All right? So I just make it really clear that Darren Sear, his last comment in this room was, how come if 4 times we told everyone we're never making marijuana legal, that there is still an issue about this, okay? Honest to God.
Thank you, Jeffrey. I think I'll just clear that
All
question. I'll take that question.
real
as far
dialogue.
As the legalization of marijuana, it was voted on and through the the state of Massachusetts, and because it was voted in favor of by the residents in Lynn, that marijuana, the sale of marijuana recreationally was decided by a vote. Again, if there are other questions, I'll invite you to please come ahead to the podium. Which is common in form for a council meeting is for you to address with your name and your address. We're not going to obviously have that tonight. You don't have to announce who you are and stay private. Thank you.
Hello. I have a question for Mr. Kevin over here for the Chief Exit County here, and I'm a college student. I'm studying criminal justice. Now, I used to live in Lawrence before, then I moved here. My question is, I heard about you having a trip like for the tour for this month in May. I was wondering what date of the tour going to, start for. Yeah, for the trip that you show us the tour about the
Reentry Center.
Yeah.
About the reentry center.
Yes.
May 16th.
Yes. Yes, I want to know what date is that going to attend. Like when it's going to start, because I'm interested of that tour of it, because I never been to that Essex County before. I want to see what it's like.
I hope I'm understanding it correctly, but we created the reentry center back in January up at the farm in Lawrence at our Correctional Alternative Center.
Mm-hmm.
The program itself has been evolving over several months, just trying to strengthen our reentry program, as I mentioned before when I spoke to, so the inmates have they're released successfully back into the community. May 16th, we're having a grand opening to kind of kick it off and give it a good push. And from there, we'll be ongoing. We'll just continue to strengthen it as we go forward, trying to reach out as many partners as we can to get those resources that we need.
Okay. All right. That's it. Thank you.
Any other questions for our panelists?
I just had a quick question for the doctor. You said in your presentation about recovery and how there's many spectrums of it, and you kind of grouped it all together as harm reduction and then recovery. And I'm a little in disagreement with some of your statistics about recovery, people that have actually recovered and don't use any drugs anymore. I don't know, I just have a personal experience with it, and I don't really see harm reduction as recovery. I agree that it's an essential part, and it's something that needs to be done, but I think you guys need to do more research on people that actually recover from addiction, because there's a lot of people out there, and I think it's an important distinction that you guys kind of miss in that whole thing. That's it, thanks.
Thank you. Anyone in the audience have any further questions for the panelists? I know we've extended the time just a little bit, but yeah, please.
Hi, this has been great. I'm interested in this as a longtime learner. I have a question for Wendy, I think is the best one for this. I'm wondering if there are examples of other communities that have turned this thing around, whose numbers are not going up. Has anybody studied that? Is there anywhere where, like, our numbers now are up since 2009, right? So can we look to anybody who's turned those numbers around? Is there another community that we can take a look at, whether they have a comprehensive plan or if there's something that they're doing that brought their numbers down?
Mm-hmm. I know that the Department of Public Health has published data that has indicated statewide a decrease in overdose deaths.
In this state?
In this state. Not by a humongous amount, but, you know, a small amount. I don't think that any community has been able to successfully turn this around yet. I think that larger communities like Boston, Lynn, Lawrence, Fall River, New Bedford, like some of those communities have continued to see increases. We're not alone in that. I think as we're looking at the data, we're still trying to figure out what's accounting for any changes that do occur. The tricky thing is that there aren't really any other communities that have collected and utilized data to the extent that we have. We're somewhat unique in that respect. So there is not yet a lot of information available about that, unfortunately. Prevention coordinators from different communities get together, they share successes, they share challenges, but nobody's quite figured this out yet.
So nobody's turned their numbers around in the last 10 years? Or
No, not that I'm aware of.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the panelists? Okay, thank you. And I guess, I'm sorry, as we conclude here this evening, I just want to first take an opportunity to thank our 6 panelists. Again, I did choose them because of forums, primarily based on a forum that I attended, sponsored by the Chamber of Commerce back in November of 2016, when many of these panelists were part of the presentation, and I did learn a lot personally from them, and thought that and felt that the knowledge and experience they have and information they have for you and the way they present it offered the best opportunity for you to be more informed, and I hope that's what you gained here tonight. I hope it's information that you'll share with others in your family, in your neighborhood, even at work, because others that weren't in attendance or are able to listen at home will have an opportunity. I apologize to the district attorney for the sound portion, the technology part, I still don't have, and thank you to Mary for all her support throughout the visual presentation parts. Again, Lynn Community Television has been great. They've been airing this forum live on Lynn Community Television. They'll be repeating that broadcast. So please do share the information that you learned, what was most helpful to you. Please reach out to me or my colleagues or anyone in the city, Ms. Desmarais, from the Health Department with any further questions that you might have that come up at a later time. The city is here to be part of the fight against opioids. We're going to do what we can to tackle this epidemic, along with many of the presenters here and along with many of you. I want to also recognize the organizations that were in the hallway that didn't act as panelists, but certainly provided that key component in this fight, whether it's answering questions or literature. You play a key role, and I think we recognize that there are differences of opinions, and that's good. And I think that's what this forum was about, a little bit of debate, but more knowledge of what we all face together, and I hope it was a help. I thank you for being here with us tonight. I again thank our panelists and all who supported here and at home, and I know this is the first of hopefully many more forums that the city's able to host to talk about this difficult issue. Thank you.